Well, hello and welcome to the Unlocking Workplace Wellbeing podcast for HR managers and business owners. Here we talk about workplace wellbeing to make everyone's lives better, including yours and mine. I'm Stephen Pink. I'm CEO of Verve Healthcare, and my guest in this episode is Richella Boggan. Now, Richella is co-founder of Sandown Business School and an expert in emotional intelligence, something I'm really keen to learn a lot more about. I read that emotional intelligence is one of the most sought after interpersonal skills in the whole workplace, with about 71% of employers valuing it more than technical skills. That might surprise you. It surprised me. This seems to show we all need it, and so I'm looking forward to this conversation. Richella, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here. Lovely to be assisting in this space.
Richella, my first question, I've got to kick us off. Can you tell me a little bit about what emotional intelligence actually is and how we know whether we've got it or not?
I think that's a great question. I think one of the things to fundamentally understand about the modern working environment that we are all managing and regulating ourselves in is that it can cause us to change our emotion in motion. So as you know, humans have a range of emotions. Most people make up a narrative around how they're being and feeling and responding or reacting according to the state change that happens in their whole system. So when we think about emotional intelligence, we're thinking about 15 really easy skills to build that helps you manage your emotion in motion much better. So it's actually a skill set. Out of the 15 skills, most people are conditioned due to their upbringing or who they've been exposed to or what they've done in their lives or what career path they've taken into using probably 5 or 6 of those 15 skills as a way of being. But instead of using all 15 and knowing and noticing that all 15 have effective function. So there's quite a lot to know around emotional intelligence, but the start point is understanding an emotional self-awareness is about really understanding that we have many emotions. So there's about 1,000 emotions that people feel on a daily basis. But if you asked the average person, they'd probably say, I have 8. And I've heard people say, I have 6. Or you might say, well, I could name 20.
That's quite scary. I'm thinking, as a manager or a leader then, have I got to know about all 1,000 or is it, no, it's not quite like that?
But it is a responsibility now to be able to paint yourself a better picture of what's going on in the world in front of your eyes. So painting a better picture is telling yourself a more truthful narrative of what's actually happening. And that will be the thing that helps you change and regulate your state. So for example, I had a recent experience where I was going to be doing a talk in front of 1,000 people. And it was the first time I'd done a live talk like that in a couple of years, actually since pre-COVID. Now I've done, 20, 30, 40, 50, but not 1,000. So I had prepared, I was well set to go. It was on the journey on the way over to the event that my stomach dropped. I thought, oh my God, now I can feel my state change. I'd got into a threat state. So I have 2 choices now. I'm very self-aware and I've worked on my emotional intelligence. So I was aware, number 1, that my state had changed. Number 2, I had a choice then. I have to choose to decide what's actually going on. So I have to choose to decide what are the emotions that are in motion. So when I really started to think about it, I started to really start to understand actually what's going on for me is that I am excited to see brand new people. I am also uncertain because normally I would have gone over and checked the audio and the equipment and the technology. I hadn't done that. So I was getting into like an uncertain state. So I was getting a bit of anxiety. I was starting to feel the joy of actually, getting in front of 1,000 people again and what that meant. So now I'm into anxiety with joy, with delight, with awe, with nervousness, with a bit of trepidation. So I'm using better language that creates a better story for me to be able to go, oh yeah, that's why that's going on. Now I'm back regulated again. and I'm now back in the driving seat of being able to pay attention and focus on what it is I have to do. That is managing your emotion in motion. So it's the difference between, if I'd left myself stay in that state, that's like, it's a smoothie versus a fruit salad. The smoothie is a mix of emotion I can't make head or tail of, and I just go, I'm scared.
Right.
Or I'm really nervous. When that's not whole system true. A fruit cocktail approach is identifying the different emotions and going, oh, I see what's going on here. Now I'm putting my nervous system back at ease. That's real intelligence in action. Huh?
I fancy a grape or a piece of peach rather than what's in this smoothie. So if we bring it back to business for a second, that's fascinating. Why is it so important for business? And is there a particular difference between big and small businesses in terms of emotional intelligence?
Well, remember, when you're in a leadership position, you're wanting people to follow you. So particularly leaders need to be strongly able to regulate their their emotions.
Right.
When there is a swing of something either going really well or something going really badly, that's when people lose their ability to be able to manage their emotion in motion. And that's where you'll see people, an Irish expression for that is people lose their ability to have cop on.
Right. What does that mean?
Cop on is the way you would normally make decisions in a normal day.
Right. Okay.
It's you feel totally resourced. And again, it's like taking yourself by surprise, going with the amount of threat, or, if suddenly something's happening and I get into threat, then I start to respond in a way that's not serving my leadership style, not serving the people around me. And I'm much more reactive. Therefore, I won't make a quality decision versus being much more responsive, regulated, able to breathe. And the emotional intelligence is those 15 skills that sit in the background that drives a better response and manages the reaction.
So if someone doesn't have emotional intelligence in a business environment, what are the consequences of not having it?
They won't be self-aware. They won't understand the impact their energy has on other people.
Right.
They won't be able to make great decisions. They'll make fast decisions versus quality decisions. So they'll be like a wrecking ball. And it will be, the mood of the day that will influence how they're being versus the skill set that they're able to steady themselves despite what's happening.
Right. So I'm going to ask a question. It's about something that happened to me this week, actually. So I was with the team at an event this week, and I felt myself being really grumpy. I knew I was in a grumpy mood, and for some reason, I couldn't get out of it. And I didn't know what to do. So I just said to the team, look, guys, I'm in a grumpy mood and it's not you. I'll get out of it. I'm probably quite low on the scale of emotional intelligence, awareness, and doing something about it. But is that the kind of thing that you then know you can get better at, how you manage and how you deal with when you recognize the causes of those things in yourself?
Well, I think the first thing, the great thing that you did was recognize that your mood was going to inform other people's mood.
Right.
Particularly if you have a status over people, then other people will be more sensitive to your mood, and you will be regulating them and their mood despite yourself. So when there's a power dynamic in play, for example, so the best thing you did was set their nervous system at ease to go, it's not them, it's you. So that's a very emotionally intelligent thing to do.
Good. Got a brownie point. That's great.
Got a great brownie point. Now, could you have regulated your state and got into a better mood? That's like evolution number 2. Yeah. Is to figure out at that time, what's driving that? Is it that I'm hangry? And it could be.
Yeah.
Is it that I'm worried about something? What am I anticipating and forecasting? What's driving my state? And that's when another emotional intelligence skill, flexibility, comes into mind. So you can be more flexible in your approach. So how am I going to be? And it might be that you choose to be a bit more upbeat for the next hour because your emotions are having an impact on others. And then you can go back to being grumpy when you've left them.
So how do you know in an organization, how do you know if that organization's got a problem with emotional intelligence? How do you spot that?
You will find there's a lot of command and control type leadership. Right. It will be a feature of a culture that's not well built and not well designed, where people are allowed to have, allowed to be a bit more reckless with their energetic impact and emotional impact that they have on other people, instead of having a steady state type organization. So you can do temperature checks on emotional intelligence within organizations and come up with the key themes that needs to be improved in order for people to work better together.
And have you got some examples of how emotional intelligence can be really well integrated into well-being in the workplace? Because it sounds like it's a massive impact.
It has a massive impact, but again, it depends on the size of the organization. It depends on how bought into them. It depends on how bought into it they are. But great emotional intelligence starts with aligning professional success to personal success to business success. So the culture of the organization needs to be born out of the people. A lot of organizations take a different approach where they try and, impose a culture on an organization versus have the people in the organization design the culture and then honor the culture and build the core teams around that. And that's what gives much more muscle strength to a culture that can actually succeed. People take ownership much more and take accountability much more. So what happens is you get less emotion in motion.
Right.
And that's what you want. That's what you're trying to regulate at the end of the day.
And is that different in big and small places? I mean, are there key characteristics you would tend to see more in a larger organization or a smaller one?
Well, I mean, it depends on the budget behind the organization too, doesn't it? I'm working with one company at the moment, and they've got the most amazing culture that I've ever experienced. Really? And it's a very speedily growing business. But you can tell the people at the top are absolutely some of the most emotionally intelligent characters that I've ever seen. But they are very self-aware. They've done loads of work on themselves. They really do honor the fact that how they're being is impacting the people around them, so that they really do a lot of work on that self-management piece. They don't just allow their emotions get out of control and, blurt and, give out and, take power from people and things like that. It's a much more professional atmosphere.
So what you're saying there about that organization's doing really well, it's growing quickly, it's all that there's a real hard link between emotional intelligence and business success, it sounds, from what you were just saying there.
Massive, but they do an awful lot of work on helping develop the inner capacity to build emotional intelligence, particularly with their younger staff members. I mean, it's a growing organization. They have people just out of college. Yeah. They really are taking the time to have them build the skills that helps them manage the world in front of their eyes. And that takes working on the world behind your eyes. And one of the things you need to work on is your emotional intelligence skill set, the 15 skills that you need to really build.
So how can leaders help their managers? And that's a really good example. And teams to develop, good emotional intelligence. What can leaders do?
Well, they definitely need to put a training plan in place.
Yeah.
Because people aren't going to magically have more or less emotional intelligence. It's their skills to build. Now, they're really easy skills to build, but often when I'm working with senior leaders, I'm doing emotional intelligence assessments with them, and I might be doing it with their teams and giving the leader key themes. And that gives us really brilliant then focused work to do in order to develop what it is that they need to build as those inner skills and capacities within the teams to be able to help them regulate themselves in the moment better. So this is, it's much more a response in the moment. That's real emotional intelligence in action than saying, I've done the work once and it's done. I mean, impulse control is something people need to work on. Most people need to work on their impulse control. They jump to conclusions. They decide the future. They hook onto a story. They believe, something that somebody's told them, and they forget to reality check and evidence check, what's the truth of that? Because we're asked to operate so fast these days, we forget ourselves.
It sounds like, from what you're saying, it sounds like almost the need to work on it, remain aware of it, be conscious of it, get better at it, never goes away. It's always, it's not like you're saying it's not something you do once and you forget it, right, I've got the certificate. It's part of you kind of forever. Is that the right way to think about it?
You're always working on it. And if you change circumstances, you're nearly going back to the drawing board again. But remember, from a whole system perspective, so each human is a whole system. So if you think about any one person in an organization, depending on, you know, whatever different level they're at, they have different levels of pressure. We have a head brain, we have a heart brain, and we have a gut brain. So we're getting and receiving signals from 3 different energy centers, and they're our main 3 energy centers. So when we're asking people, one of the emotional intelligence skills that is talked about a lot is empathy. Empathy leads to compassion. That's much more of a heart-based way of being. But if I can go into organizations and they're all head, they get stuff done, loads, but they don't put enough energy into heart or gut. And it's a balance across all 3 is what's really healthy around a great culture. When do I need to be empathetic? Who's in front of me that I need to empathize with? What does that actually look like in action? So if you don't have that as a natural ability, you can learn it. But again, it's how do I slow myself down and recognize actually the job I'm in, the demands on me, I have a tendency to be all about getting stuff done. And I leave the heart of how I am outside the business. So again, you know, one of the things I often say is, have you ever worked for somebody that is all about getting stuff done? You will feel like they're pretty cold. They are, and they don't really care about you. The opposite of that is, have you ever worked for somebody who's all heart? And they don't make great leaders either, because they're too heart. Because you need a balance of head and heart, but now you need a balance of head and heart and gut. Because you need to be able to sense the environment, sense the triggers and trends in the environment, particularly as it's changing, sense the geopolitical environment, the key business triggers. So we need to listen to our gut signals, our heart signals, and our head signals. And most people are out of balance between one or the other. You need a good balance across them all. And the emotional intelligence skills actually fit across them all.
I thought I knew all this stuff before this conversation. I think I've got lots to learn. You mentioned the 15 elements of emotional intelligence. I'm not sure if elements is the right word. Are you able to share with us kind of what they are or what some of them are?
Well, the science behind it emerged from Reuven Bar-On, and our emotional intelligence assessments are work that has emerged and scientifically validated out of his work. So there, he broke it down into 5 different composites that become like a lens. So 2 of them are on self.
Right.
1 of them is on how am I with others. And then the other 2 are how am I managing myself in the environment, which becomes all about decision making and all about making sure that I stay well. So you're working on, you know, out of the 15 skills, 6 of the skills will be how do I manage my self-perception and self-expression. And in there, there's 3 skills each. From an interpersonal perspective, you're talking about empathy and social responsibility and interpersonal relationships. And then we're down into how do I manage in the environment, stress tolerance, optimism. How do I make sure that I am balancing all of those things? So you look for effective function across all 15. And then you look for how do I spend my energy when I need to. So for example, if I went into somebody with high emotional intelligence, will have the capacity, for example, this is just giving you a lightweight example, to go into a shop with £10 and spend the £10 if the items are there that they want to spend. But if the items aren't there, they'll walk back out with their £10. Now, somebody with low emotional intelligence will be distracted and go in and go, well, they weren't there, but I'll spend the tenner anyway. Because you're spending energy. That's why it's related to energy. Emotion and motion is energy related. So you want people, and particularly in leadership roles today, to spend as little energy as possible on the things that they don't need to pay attention to, and don't get distracted by some of the noise that can be, you know, causing emotion to be emotion, or people looking for attention, or, focusing just on things that aren't actually going to give them momentum to move forward. So you need to be wise around how you spend your energy, which means you need to be able to regulate your emotional intelligence really well.
God, I really thought I had this nailed, and I haven't.
There's a lot to know around this, to be fair.
Well, if I think about some things you've been saying and where I've seen sort of odd or unpleasant things happen, I mean, negotiation and conflict can often bring out all sorts of emotions in people,
Yeah.
where it's very passionate and determined to achieve an outcome. In terms of dealing with conflict and perhaps difficult conversations, that's an inevitable part of any workplace. But how can really good emotional intelligence help in those circumstances?
One of the things we want, one of the most valuable business skills today, particularly in organizations, is how do I make sure that creativity and innovation is captured? That means people need to be together. I'm not very creative on my own, but give me a few people to work with and I'll brainstorm like mad, and we will become very creative and innovative and could come up with brilliant solutions. Now, creativity and innovation means you need to invite in healthy tension. So if people don't have a great self-perception, if they don't see, if they don't see themselves correctly, their interpersonal relationships then might fall into more fractious or friction or conflict, because they're starting to, fight for themselves versus fight for the company.
Right.
So you're jockeying for a position to be right versus the right move for the company. So you want a balance between, you want to make sure that you're driving people together, but inviting healthy tension, and it requires emotional intelligence. And the one of the key skills to build is, how do people remain independent from the emotion in motion and and really stay adult as best possible, so that they remain objective and can reality test and problem solve in a much more creative way. So the ability to remain independent of somebody else's wants and needs and influence and power and status over you is quite a skill to build. So you can see that some people are better at it than others. It can depend on age and stage. It can depend on how you've been socialized. I know some people who are really good at it, but I know some other people who just go, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to go with the flow, because I don't want to get into trouble. I don't want to X, Y, and Z. They've lost their independent ability to make a great decision on their own, or be part and parcel of a great team and have a say and have a voice and assert their voice.
So are some people just naturally better at this stuff than others, or can anyone be really good at it?
Anybody can be really good at it, given that they put focused attention on building it. Most people, as I said to you, are really good at a few of the skills, but aren't brilliant at them all.
And does neurodiversity have an impact on that, in your view?
Well, I mean, that will only lend to the fact that they'll be good at certain ones, and probably that they have overdeveloped certain skills versus others. Right. I often liken emotional intelligence as a metaphor to, it's like going to the gym. Have you ever seen somebody who goes to the gym who has only worked on their shoulders? So they're brilliant at lifting heavy weights, but they have little chicken legs, and you're thinking,
I was thinking
person never has leg day. Yeah. But you've seen other people who go to the gym and all they do is build muscle, but they don't work on their flexibility and they don't work on their cardio.
Yeah.
Now, an emotionally intelligent person will go and work on everything that they need to do to condition their system. Right. So they will have a toned muscle set that best serves them and their lifestyle. They'll have a cardiovascular system that fits with them, and they'll be flexible enough to get through their life. But you can see how it's a great analogy for, I can see how you've worked on some of yourself, but actually for the environment we live in today, because change is happening so much and so fast, we need to build the capacity in the world behind our eyes and emotionally regulate ourselves much better. Everybody does well when things are going well. It's when things aren't going well in the perception of the people, then it's like, now how do I take personal responsibility to manage the world behind my eyes, so that I'm telling myself the true story of what's happening to me. Therefore, I'll stay much more effectively functioning. I'll stay much more better in my decision-making capacity.
So one of the things I've taken out of that is, it's not, if you want to get good at this stuff, it's not shoulders and chicken legs, it's whole body workout.
Yeah. And being open to the learning that goes into that.
Yeah, that's really good. We're coming towards the end of the podcast. I just want to finish with a question. Obviously, Richella, we know that emotional intelligence is a particular focus at Sandown Business School, and for you, obviously, in particular. What was it that led to this focus and this passion for you?
Well, I mean, we are a coach training provider. So all coaches today, professional coaches, need to be able to professionally manage their emotional intelligence, their emotion in motion. Otherwise, they will get hooked by the clients that they have, and they will get carried away with their story versus staying objective and being able to go, right, this is not about me, it's about them. How do I make sure that my clients walk away from me feeling more resourced about themselves because they met me and worked with me, instead of me telling them what to do? There is a temptation when you feel like you're working with somebody who is a lot of emotion in motion, you'll have a tendency to want to solve them, which is not doing them a service. They need to feel like they can solve themselves. So you need to help your clients work on their emotional intelligence. But as a coach, you are the first person that needs to be able to do that brilliantly. Therefore, every coach needs to understand emotional intelligence, needs to understand how do they develop it and keep it and regulate it and keep it effectively functioning. That is the 101 for why it's so important for us.
Wow. And is there any, before we close, any final thoughts you'd like to leave with the people that are watching and listening to this podcast?
Well, I always say to my clients, emotional intelligence is 15 really easy skills to build. It isn't like IQ, it's EQ. It's your emotional intelligence. So once you pay attention to doing it well, you build up so much more confidence. Self-esteem is driven out of your ability to be able to tell yourself the right story in the moment when you could go either way.
Right.
And it really helps you stay much more balanced and neutral. Therefore, you will have a much more happier, harmonious life, because you won't be swinging from one way to the other. And God knows the world is chaotic enough. So we're far too open for influence, and we're far too wanting to please other people. Whereas if we're emotionally intelligent, we will be much more likely to really ease the people around us and ourselves and not please them. And we've no responsibility to please people, but we do have a responsibility to ease people. And that's what will drive that. So it's very easy to build, but you've got to actually invite yourself, not just to know it, but to actually practice it and it become the being of who you are.
Fantastic. There's a lot there to think about. I think I'm going to go and do some reading and practice on my emotional intelligence, because I thought I nailed it and I don't think I have actually, but we won't tell anyone that.
Always a work in progress. There's no amount of perfect. It's, it's a job on for everybody. You're never done.
Thank you very much for sharing your insights. We really appreciate that.
Pleasure.
Thank you for being part of the Unlocking Workplace Wellbeing podcast from Verve Healthcare. If you want to improve wellbeing in your workplace through structured access to mental health support, physiotherapy, GPs, or how to manage personal finances in a better way, then we've got a solution for you. We've got a proactive approach which gets to the heart of the problem. Come and visit us at vervehealthcare.co.uk and please be sure to subscribe. Thank you.